everybody, this is Dream, and we have a nice Sunday slate here, and the main slate on FanDuel for football. Uh, Before I get started, can you guys smash that like and subscribe button? So let's go ahead and get into this. So we have quarterbacks here. We're going to start with Patrick Mahomes for Kansas City against Jacksonville. He's my favorite quarterback on the slate, not to leave out Josh Allen, but he is the top tier guy on the slate. He's got a good matchup here, and he's been extremely consistent this season. I think he's going to be the highest scoring quarterback this week by quite a bit, especially if Josh Allen is out, which he's questionable currently. So he's a great option. Then, of course, Josh Allen. Now, we're going to have to see if he's going to play. But if he does play, he's got a good matchup here, and I do think he's in a good spot. But again, he may not play, so we'll have to keep an eye on that. Then Justin Fields here for Chicago. He's been playing extremely well the last few weeks, and I expect that to continue in this plus matchup against Detroit. And then Tua Tagovailoa, he from Miami. Now that he's starting to get going, him and Tyreek Hill are playing well together, and he's been having some really big weeks. I think he's going to continue to do that. He has absolutely the ability to have, 350 plus weeks, week in and week out with a bunch of touchdowns. And, now that he's back and he's feeling good, he should be able to continue to advance and do that. Overall, I think quarterback situation is pretty expensive this week compared to some weeks where there's more values at the lower end here. There's just a lot of injuries to quarterbacks. Like Matthew Stafford is probably my favorite cheap quarterback, but he is also in concussion protocol and unlikely to play probably as a result. So I think you gotta have to want to pay up for a quarterback this week. At running back, we're gonna start with Saquon Barkley here for the New York Giants against Houston. He's in a really good spot here, and he's also a really good running back. He has been a little bit. He hasn't had any bad weeks this season, but he's also not had a huge blow up week, really either, except for week one. But I do think that will change this week. He has a huge opportunity to have a great week here. Derrick Henry is another guy that's just super consistent. He's been great, almost over 20 all but 1 week in the last 6 or 7, and I expect that to continue here against Denver, who's not a bad defense, but they're not been as good as we kind of expect them to be. Josh Jacobs has been inconsistent this season, but he's in a great matchup here, and I expect him to have a good week here against Indiana, who's just really bad against everybody basically. Then see here, Pierce for Houston. Now he is limited, and he may or may not play, so you gotta have to keep in track on that one. But he has been really consistent for most of the season, and if he does play, then I expect him to have a pretty good game here against the Giants. Then we're gonna look at Aaron Jones for Green Bay. Now he's also limited, and he's another guy we're gonna have to take a look at. But if he does play and he is a starter, then he'll have some opportunity because when he is this lead back, he definitely gets enough attempts and usually yards to pay off here. But again, we do have to check back closer to the slate. Then we're gonna look at James Conner for Arizona against the Rams. Now the Rams have a decent defense, and he hasn't had a super breakout game yet, but he has been getting a decent amount of touches, and it's just a matter of time before he kind of has a bigger game. And I think this is actually a pretty good spot for him to do so because Kyler Murray may not play, and if he doesn't play, then Connor is going to get a lot more opportunity as a result. Then we're going to look at Singletary for Buffalo. He's been playing, the problem with Buffalo is that they don't run the ball a ton, but he is the guy that does run the ball, and he also gets some receptions through the air, so that gives him some upside. He's a really good value option if you're just desperate to find a value play. In the wide receiver spot, we have Cooper Kupp here, obviously for the Rams. He's just the best wide receiver on the slate. He's been dominating throughout the whole season, and I expect him to continue to do that in this matchup. Diggs for Buffalo, he's another guy that's been really good this season. I do want to make sure that Josh Allen ends up playing before utilizing him this week. I mean, he's pretty much matchup proof, but I much prefer him with Josh Allen playing. Then we're going to look at Tyreek Hill. Tyreek. For Miami. Going along with Tua, I really like Tyreek. He's been extremely good the last few weeks, especially as Tua has gotten back healthy, and I expect him to continue to dominate. Then we're going to look at oops, why is this not working? Justin Jefferson here for Minnesota against Buffalo. This is going to be a shootout, and he's going to get a lot of opportunities as a result of that. He's had a pretty good season so far. He's been a little bit inconsistent, but he's going to have a good upside in this matchup. Devontae Adams is coming off a gigantic week where he scored 31 fantasy points, and he can do that occasionally. They've got a lot of injuries, so he's getting more opportunity as a result. And he's got a decent matchup here against Indiana, and I expect him to have a good week again. Juju Smith-Schuster, his price point is pretty good here on FanDuel, and he's been playing more and getting more targets the last few weeks. I expect that to continue in this matchup and give him a lot of opportunity, especially against a team that's really bad against the pass. Amon Ross St. Brown, he's another guy I like for Detroit. Now, he's got a tough defense to go up against, but he's been pretty good, even though he's been inconsistent, he's been good in matchups like this, and I expect him to have a good game. Uh, Deontay Johnson here for Pittsburgh. He's a cheaper play that hasn't really had a breakout game this season, but he is getting a decent amount of targets, and it's just a matter of him pulling some of those in and getting some big yards and potentially a touchdown. He's a good secondary play in this price range. Then we're Christian Kirk for Jacksonville. He's another guy I actually like quite a bit this week. He's got a decent matchup, and he's been inconsistent this season, but he has breakout potential in a game like this, and I expect him to play well as a result and get a lot of opportunity. And then Michael Pittman finally for Indianapolis rather. He's been inconsistent this season, but he has some upside in this matchup against a terrible pass defense, and I expect him to have a decent situation, especially with the new quarterback, where he's going to be relied on a little bit more heavily. And then in tight ends, Kelsey, obviously the overall top guy here for Kansas City. Obviously pretty expensive, but he's also, getting plenty of touches every game, and that should continue this week. Zach Ertz here for Arizona. He's been pretty inconsistent, but he has some upside in this matchup. And if you need, obviously, sometimes you want to pay lower at tight end, and he's kind of a good secondary option off Kelsey. But if you really want to save money, which I'm probably going to try to do this week, is Pat Freiermuth against the Saints. Now, obviously, Pittsburgh's not very good, but he's actually been pretty decent, getting a decent chunk of targets. If he can sneak a touchdown in this game, then he would definitely pay off a lot. But I do think that him or Forrest Marino, uh, Foster, sorry, not I don't know why I say Forrest. Um, uh, Marino is also a guy that I like okay this week with the injuries to the Raiders. Obviously, last week he didn't do particularly great, but he got some targets. He's been getting more targets, and it's just a matter of time he gets a touchdown, and if that's the case, he will pay off here. And then also TJ Hawkinson, Hawkin, for last tight end here for Minnesota. I expect him to have a pretty good game and be utilized more than he has the last couple weeks. And I expect him. He had 9 targets last week, but before that he only had 3 or 4 targets in the last couple games. But I expect him to have touchdown potential in this matchup. For defense, we're going to look at the Saints first against Pittsburgh. Now, Pittsburgh is one of the worst teams on the slate, and the Saints, they don't tend to get as many interceptions as some of the other defenses, but they are forcing some fumble recoveries, and they get lots of sacks, and so I think they have a pretty good opportunity in this particular matchup. The Giants, they have a really good matchup here as well. And they've been a little bit better when it comes to the fumble recoveries and forcing fumbles and stuff than most teams. And I expect them to have a really good game in this matchup against Houston. And then the Titans against Denver. Denver has struggled to move the ball this season, and I expect the Titans to do well here. They get a lot of interceptions, and you can see they've gotten one in every game but one. And they also, force a decent amount of fumbles for a team, and they get some sacks. I expect them to have a really good game. They're probably the safest defense on the slate. And then we have the Raiders, who are pretty unreliable defensively, but they have a great matchup here against the Colts. And they should have some opportunity to score some fantasy points this week against a pretty young quarterback. So with that said, guys, thank you guys for liking, commenting, and subscribing. If you have any comments or questions about this, feel free to leave them below.